My name is Jason Mather, and I'm the author of Shadow Life, an upcoming book being published by Edge Publishing in ebook format. And if I could, I'd like to take a moment and extend a very hearty thank you to Edge Publishing for this opportunity. It's always been a dream of mine to be a published author, and to have this come to fruition is a dream come true. The idea for Shadow Life came about as a game I was actually playing. I was trying to come up with something to write in a book format, and being a huge fan of the movies of James Bond, and particularly the Ian Fleming novels, my wife recommended to me, just as a starting place, why don't you write a James Bond story? Just something to get you going. Maybe it would be published or maybe it wouldn't, but it would be a good starting place. This led to me sort of playing a little game where I began creating James Bond-esque characters for friends and family. I created the new M, who in the book became Grit, for my wife. I created Onyx for a friend of mine. Onyx actually ended up in the book almost completely unchanged from my original idea, because she was by far my favorite character. I created a character for myself. It was not James Bond or even a main character. He was a henchman, a very loyal henchman, who actually ended up so changed that in the book he became Gino, so he pretty much completely switched sides. When I actually started trying to write Shadow Life, I found myself, however, with kind of a snag. As much as I liked the James Bond movies, I didn't really feel that writing about a superhero was in my strength. It's sort of strange, but there's an aspect of writing about superheroes that comes with its own conventions and even a certain amount of ego from the author themselves, and something that I found very difficult. I found it much more interesting to create a character that was much more an everyman and put him in a similar situation. My character in the book has very little capability or power to deal with what he's dealing with until much later in the book, where he actually gains a certain amount of control. In looking for what other type of character to create, I actually turned to another source, probably my favorite author of all time, Raymond Chandler, and his character Philip Marlowe. Now, Marlowe is a protagonist and he has some detective skills, but he's not a superhero, and he spends a lot of the time, I've always felt in the books, sort of chasing people around, not really sure what's going on, just being willing to go after it in a very dogged fashion. And sometimes he ends the book not incredibly enlightened about the big picture of what's going on. He solved the case that he was asked to solve, but many times it seems like there was a lot more going on that he kind of missed because it didn't really relate to him, and his focus kept it from him. I turned to Chandler for a few stylistic decisions as well. First off, I'm a big fan of noir as a genre, and I wouldn't go so far as to say my book is straight up noir, but I would like to believe that I intended many of the conventions in there. I've always felt one of the most interesting parts of noir is that it's about what's not said and what's not seen. Much of the time in Chandler's books, violence takes place off the screen, and you have situations, particularly in the books and the movies with the conventions of the time, that you have books that are basically about sex and violence that aren't really allowed to show much sex and violence. So it's all about implication. Also with Chandler, I've always felt that nobody writes dialogue as well as he does. It's not, I wouldn't call it extremely realistic, but there is a hard-bitten poetry to it that has always struck me as almost genius. And I would like to believe that I at least attempted to portray some of that type of dialogue in my own book. Now, whether or not I succeeded, I guess I would leave up to the reader. So that's the book Shadow Life. A little bit noir, a lot of sci-fi, but mostly me. If you're looking to read it, I thank you. If you read it and enjoy it, I thank you even more so. It's the best part of being an author is having readers. So from me, thank you. Good night.